Okay, good morning, everyone. In today's lecture, what we are going to look at is fundamentals of sound and music. So, in the previous week, we sort of briefly touched upon what are the various things that we will be covering as part of this course, and one of those is this topic about sound and music. And when we say that, we are going to mainly be looking at sound, the properties of sound, physics of sound, and how that can impact in audio production. So this is sort of the basic knowledge that we need to have in order to do any sort of audio production that we may want to do in a much more effective manner. So the content of this course is based on a number of resources online, and I would always share those information as well. So maybe you can also go there and find additional information relevant to that. So that is included for your benefit, that you can go and do a bit more of learning on your own. The way that the expectation is that we will be covering quite a bit of the content in class, but it is also expected that you put your time in to learn various other things related to what we may be covering in class on your own time. So when we say sound, the first thing that we need to look at is what is the sound, or what is a sound, and what makes the sound in a sort of a physical environment. So a sound wave is basically the vibrations that can be transferred through air molecules. So if we can make some movement in the air molecules from a particular source, so that is, say, if we move certain things, and then if we can make the air waves move, and then at some point, some other end, that can be received as a sound signal. So in a normal person-to-person scenario, in a person-to-person scenario, like say, if I am speaking to you in person, so there, myself or my vocal cords are going to move the air molecules in a particular manner, and that movement is going to be transferred through the air between you and me, and then at the other end your ear is going to receive those air movements in a particular way, and then that is going to receive that as the sound. So whatever that we are doing in terms of producing some sound from a source, then that is going to be transferred through a medium and be received at the other end as again a similar movement of molecules. So that movement is what we would identify as a sound wave. So we would normally draw or represent sound waves through a wave signal. So it would be, we would draw it like a wave signal, and with that wave signal we would identify few different properties. So the first one is called a wavelength. So a wavelength is a property of the waves that is decided by two things known as crests and troughs. So when we have the shape of a wave like this, like a sine wave kind of a wave, in such a wave, the top parts of the wave, like these, are what we would identify as crests, and the bottom parts we would identify them as troughs. So that is the two variations that we would identify within a wave, within a sound wave. The crests are the uppermost movements and troughs are the lowermost movements. And that variation is what we would identify as the length or the amount of movement that we have, and we would call that the amplitude. And the distance between two crests, when we measure that distance, we would identify that as the wavelength. So these are the basic properties that we would have for a sound wave. So a sound wave will have movements of molecules in a particular manner, and of those movements, the uppermost movements we will identify them as crests, the lowermost movements we would identify them as troughs, and that distance between, or the change of movement from a neutral point, we would identify that as the amplitude. It is going up, how far from where it is normally at. So that is the amplitude. And between two crests, so from one crest to the next crest, the distance between those two, we would identify that as the wavelength. So even though we would normally represent the sound wave through like a wave diagram, like say like this one, like normally we would draw a sound wave like that. We would draw the sound wave like that, saying that is the representation that we have for the sound wave. We would say, like as we previously said, these are the crests, these are the troughs. So we would, and that is the wavelength. So we would use that sort of a representation. But in reality, or in how the sound waves or the sound molecules are going to travel, the travel of sound molecules is going to be not up and down, it is going to be compressions and depressions. So say, if I am speaking, currently the air molecules are at this particular gap. So the air molecules are like this. So say we have, this is the normal distance of air molecules that would be there. So then when we start speaking, or when the sound is traveling, it can do two things. It can compress those air molecules or bring those air molecules closer to each other. So now they are much closer to each other. So that is one way it can change the movement of sound. The energy can change the air molecules in that manner. So they are now compressed. Or the other way that they can do is they can depress them, or that is the opposite of compressing. So now they are more further apart. The gap between those are now much more than they are closer to each other. So that is the difference between compression and depression. So when we are actually drawing that in a diagram, that is when we would use these crests to represent, this compression would be represented by the crests, and the depressions or refractions could be represented by the troughs. So the wave diagram that we would normally have, this wave diagram, that is a representation that we would have, whereas this one is the thing that actually happens in the sort of physical environment. So the wave diagram is more about sort of a mathematical representation, or sort of a logical representation for us to see, whereas the other one is the actual physical movement of molecules that we would have. So when we think about sound waves, we can identify a number of key properties as that belongs to sound waves to differentiate between various sound waves. So these are the things that is going to dictate how you get those sound waves, or how you perceive those sound waves. If, for example, if I am speaking, I am generating some sounds and you are getting that sound. If I am clapping, again that is making some sounds and you are getting that sound back. If I am doing something else like knocking somewhere, again you are getting some sounds, but again that is different. And as someone who is at the receiving end, you are normally able to differentiate between me speaking, hello, hello, and me clapping, and me knocking somewhere. So the way that we as humans differentiate these are based on these properties of sounds. So these various properties of sounds will dictate how that sound is perceived, or these are the properties of sound that will dictate how the sound changes and how those changes are perceived by a listener. So these are some of the properties that these sound waves will have, and we will look at them individually. So speed of travel, frequency of the signal, wavelength of the signal, amplitude of the signal. So these are the basic properties like we already identified. Then additionally, things like loudness, the shape of the signal, phase of the signal, harmonics and timbre. So these are additional properties that would also be there. So we will look at each of these in a bit more detail. So the first property of sound is the speed. So when we say speed, what we are talking about here is how quickly the signal of sound can travel from one place to the other. So we know that the signal of sound travels at a constant speed, but that constant depends on the temperature of the environment. So if it is a very cool environment, it travels at a particular speed, and if it is a much hot environment, it would travel at a different speed. So similarly, if it is like say, one of the reasons why we would see, say for example, places that are of high altitude like mountain tops and things like that, or where the environment is much colder, in those environments the travel of sound, or the speed of the sound traveling, will be much lower. So as this is again a property, the basic property of sound, but we need to know these things to understand how we may be able to apply that in, say for example, in a production environment. So if we are doing different sound productions and then we have to work with various issues that are brought up by these signals and how these signals react with the environment, so the understanding of how that is made and what are the things that could be behind that is essential for us to know. So that is why we are looking at these things in a bit more detail. So the second basic property of sound is frequency. So frequency is again like as with any signals, what is the oscillation frequency, like how often it changes from changes its pattern, so goes through its wave pattern. So that is the frequency that we would identify. Say for example, if we take a particular signal, or within a particular time frame. So if we take a particular time frame, we could calculate what is the how many cycles of signals are there. So for example, this may have 2 and this may have 4. That means this has a higher frequency than the other one. So that is the basic idea behind frequency that we would have, and this is what we would calculate between, like counting, say for example, the peaks of those signals. And this frequency is what dictates what we would normally also say as pitch of a sound. So we would say like maybe in sort of music sense also we would talk about high-pitched, low-pitched voices, instruments, and so on. So when we say like a high-pitched sound signal, that means it is a higher frequency sound signal. So it has more cycles of signals within the same period of time. And when we say low frequency signals, we have low amount of cycles of signals within a period of time. So that is frequency. So frequency is the basic property of a sound signal, and pitch is the interpretation of such sound signals that we would have. Then the other property that we would have is wavelength. Again, wavelength is again also going to be a measure of the basic signal property, and it is going to be measured in the length between two crests, as we even initially identified. Wavelength is going to be the distance between two crests. So we could have either a short wavelength or a longer wavelength. So that is the physical distance that we would have, and wavelength would also correlate to the frequency, because if the frequency is higher, then more number of cycles are happening within a short period of time. So then that means those cycles should be smaller. Whereas if we have a lower frequency, they can take much longer. So lower frequency signals will have long wavelength, and higher frequency signals will have shorter wavelength. So wavelength and frequency will correlate with each other in terms of their length, and the wavelengths will depend on, if the wavelength is higher, the frequency is lower, and the other way around as well. Then another property that we would use to differentiate between signals is what is called amplitude. And amplitude is the one that is going to dictate how loudly we are hearing the signal. So the amplitude is basically the distance from the 0 point or the neutral point for the signal, and then how far the signal goes up or down, or like how much it is get compressed or depressed by the movement of the sound. So that amount of movement is what we would identify as amplitude, and the more the movement, we would say more louder the sound that we perceive. So this is the loudness of the sound that we hear, and it is normally measured in decibels, and the unit that we would use is either decibel. So decibel SPL is a common way we would identify. So that is the sound pressure level, or the change in sound pressure level is what we would measure. So if we have more sound pressure level, then we would have increased volume. So when we increase the volume in a device, what we are doing is we are increasing the sound pressure level that is being produced there. So those are the properties that are sort of physical properties that are measured, that we would measure as sort of basic properties of a sound signal. But in addition to those, what we would also have is properties that are more about how we perceive the sound signals, and how, as sort of human listeners, we would listen to those sound signals, and how we would identify those differences in sound signals. So one of those properties is loudness. So we said, like, say, amplitude. So we have a signal, and we said amplitude is from the neutral point, the distance between the change of the sound pressure level is what we would identify as the amplitude. So amplitude is the actual physical measurement of change in sound pressure level or change in the sound signal. So that is the amplitude. Whereas loudness is how we would perceive that signal change. Say for example, it may be producing a higher amplitude signal, but if that is not produced for a long period of time, we may not perceive that as a loud signal compared to if a less amplitude signal but that is being produced for a prolonged time, we may perceive that as a loud signal. So loudness is not about the actual physical property of the signal, but it is more about the perceive or how we hear, how we interpret that signal from a human perspective is what loudness is. So the loudness of these signals would depend on not just of the amplitude but also the various things, various other properties of the sound, and then we may interpret that differently. Say for example, we may perceive a higher frequency signal differently than a lower frequency signal, and in most cases higher frequency signals are not very pleasant to hear, or like they may be sort of hurting the ear drums after a particular point in time, whereas lower frequency signal may interact differently. So with all these other properties of the signals, the human ear would assign a sort of perspective saying like, okay, that is a loud signal and this is not a loud signal. So the loudness is not a sort of a physical measure of the sound signal, but rather an interpretation of how we listen to the sound. So when we say the sound is loud, or say that music is loud, we are not just saying that that sound signal is coming at a very high amplitude, but we are also saying in this particular room, in this particular temperature, in this particular music that is playing, and to my particular ears, I am perceiving that as a loud signal. And a friend of yours may see, okay, that is not a very loud signal. So different people may hear things differently. And that is one of the reasons. Say for example, if you think about at home, you may be watching TV as a family, and different members of your family may set the volume at different levels, saying that is the normal for them. So not everyone is going to have the same loudness level that they perceive, because that may change based on their age, based on their experiences, based on what they normally used to do. So these are some of the things that would impact the loudness. So from a sound production perspective, it may not be enough to just think about the amplitude as sort of a physical measure, but also need to think about loudness from a human perspective. So the next property that we will look at is what is called envelopes. And an envelope of a sound is basically the shape of the sound signal that we would normally identify. So what we would have is, when we think about a sound signal, what we are normally doing is we are drawing it as a wave like this. So that is the basic thing that we do. We are drawing it as a wave signal. So that is the basic sort of the shape of the sound signal that we go about. But when we think about from the perspective of a sound being produced, so for example, let's assume a sound being produced by me clapping. So I am clapping, and that is producing a single sort of event of a sound. It's not sort of a continuous signal. So that is the sound that I am producing. So that is going to create some variation of movement in the air molecules, and that is what we are going to perceive. So with that, what we would have is we would be able to sort of map out the change in amplitude. So with sort of a particular movement, we can say amplitude will increase, and at a particular point it will decrease and stop. So let's take the example of clapping. So now there's no sound, so no signal is being produced. So now I clap. At the moment I clapped, a sound signal was created, so amplitude increased, and after I finished clapping, it dropped, the amplitude dropped, and then it again became silent. So silent, sound, increase and decrease, and then silent again. So that is sort of the fundamental unit of change when a point sound is being made. So when such a sound is being made, we would be able to identify few points in that signal. So the start of the signal, or when the sound is being produced, before the start of the signal, we would say that as the onset point. Then with the signal, it would reach a particular peak point that we would identify as the peak. Then at a particular point, it would go and die down eventually. So with that, we would also identify a number of additional keys that these things will come into play when we talk about various sound production things, like when we are manipulating sound and all. These are things that we will come back to, like attack, decay, sustain and release. So basically what those are, attack is the time that takes from the onset for it to go to peak. So there's no sound, suddenly it goes to the higher peak sound. So from there it goes to that higher peak, that is the attack time. Then decay is that attack from that peak point, it is going to die down to a lower point. So that is the decay time. Then in certain sounds, certain type of sound, it would drop from peak, drop from the higher amplitude, but still keep a particular level of amplitude for a slightly longer time than in certain other sounds. Say for example, if I do like there, the sound increases and drops fairly quickly. But say if I make a sound like then it's like it's going up, and then I keep it sustained for a period of time and then drop. So that sustain is the period of time that not the peak amplitude, but a particular amplitude is being kept for a period of time. Then release is when it dies down to again back to sort of neutral. So that is the sort of, if we take a particular point of a sound, it will go through this movement of being from the onset point of no sound to a peak point, and maybe a sustaining point for a period of time, and then being released and to a no sound point. So these are some of the features that we would use when we are manipulating sound signals using what we call envelope. So an envelope is the shape of a waveform, a unit of a waveform that we would be able to manipulate, and this is something that we would be using quite a bit when we are looking into audio production and sort of even in sort of digital tools and so on. Then the other property that we can look at is what is called phase. So phase is basically when we have two waveforms, when we may be having two waveforms, and those waveforms may be following a particular pattern. Say this is a waveform, so that is a basic waveform. So, and there could be another waveform. So these are two waveforms, and when we have two waveforms and two similar waveforms, like say if we have one waveform here, the same one is produced from another source at the same time, if they are produced at the same time, if they are together at the same time, what will happen is when those two sounds are produced at the same time, their volume will increase or their amplitude will increase as a single signal. Say for example, that is the case when we say, a good example would be when we have an orchestra and a number of people are playing the violin, then one person is playing the violin and the other person is also playing the same notes in the violin. So now that is amplified to number of users. So that is something that we would do as well. That is the addition of waveforms. The other possibility is we have two waveforms, but these two waveforms have what is called out of phase. So the second possibility is when we have the two waveforms, two identical waveforms again, but they are now what we call out of phase. So as you can see, when one waveform is having its peak, the other one is having its low point. So the one's crest and the other one's trough are matching in these two waveforms. So that is like they are time shifted. So they are similar waveforms, but they are not starting at the same time, or like they are more, so they are reversed. So when one is the amplitude, the other one is the reverse of that amplitude. So this is what happens when you can see this phenomenon when we do when we think about what is called as noise cancellation. So when we think about, say, these noise cancelling headphones, for example, or some of your phones may have what is called noise cancellation or active noise cancellation. So in those cases, what they do is they would get the signal of the sound outside. So normally that is the noise coming from outside, and then they would produce a signal of the opposite, that is the opposite of the original sound. So when those two signals are added together, they would amount to what is no sound, or like all the sounds, the amplitudes of one sound will be cancelled out by the negative amplitude of the other signal. So that is a common occurrence of noise cancellation, and that is a place where out of phase is something that may be applied. And the other possibility is when we have signals that are of different sort of waves. When the waves are different, then in those cases it will produce a particular output, that is an addition of those two. Again, these are something that you have to keep in mind when you are thinking about sound production and so on, because if things are out of phase, if the microphones are producing sounds in out of phase, or if the speakers are out of phase, then we may lead to a point where we are actually producing cancellation of signals, and we are reducing the possible outputs of the production. So we should be able to think about whether our signals are out of phase for a particular reason, and whether that is leading for the signals to lose their amplitude to some extent. So that is also something that we will have to think about. The other property that we would look at when we are talking about sound signals is what is called harmonics. So harmonics is normally it could be talked a bit more in the context of music, for example, but it is also applicable to any sort of sound signals. That is, we would rarely have a sound signal that is of only a particular frequency of a signal. Say for example, if I am speaking, I would never be speaking, or the sound that I am producing will never be a single frequency. What I would be speaking is, while I am speaking, I will be producing sound signals of various frequencies at the same time, and all those will be added together to produce a composite waveform. So with that, what we would be able to identify is a number of subwaves or number of additional waves that are put together to create this composite wave, and that is what we would identify as harmonics. So even in the case of a musical instrument, even in the case of a human speaking or any other sound, it is rarely going to be a pure sound source. It is going to be a sound source that is producing sounds as a pattern of harmonics, and those things combined together will produce a composite waveform. So that is the type of sound signal that we will be working with. So it would never be possible for us to say that particular sound source is, not never, but in most cases it would not be, especially from sound that is being produced from the real world. We would rarely have sound sources that is producing a very singular frequency. In most cases we will have a harmonic frequency range that is producing a composite waveform. Then one of the other key properties of sound, especially in the context of how sound is being perceived by human users, is what is called timbre. So timbre is basically how these complex sounds, so we have said the sounds are not going to be singular sounds. The sounds are normally going to be produced by these harmonic waves as sort of complex waves. And with that, we are going to perceive a particular part of the sound as the core frequency of the sound or the core harmonics of the sound, and that is the one that we are going to associate with that particular sound source. Say for example, if we think about a piano being played, a particular frequency of that piano may be the one that we are thinking about. When someone is speaking, we always differentiate between, say for example, when I am speaking and when someone else is speaking, you will be able to differentiate, okay, that is that person, this is this person. We have the ability to differentiate between different people speaking. And how we are doing that is, we are associating certain variations in their sound signal, their frequencies and so on, and we classify that as a particular timbre, particular way that we perceive that sound. So this is similar to how loudness and amplitude are different. Amplitude is the property, physical property, and loudness is the how you perceive the sound. Similarly, timbre is like that as well. Timbre is how you perceive the sound from a human perspective. So this is the reason why we are able to say, for example, even when two sound sources that are producing sounds in the same frequency range, say for example two different sort of drums or two different instruments or even like two different humans, if we are producing the sound in the same frequency range and we would still be able to differentiate between those two things, that is because the timbre is different. Say for example, a simple example could be two sound sources producing two frequencies, 100 Hertz and 200 Hertz at the same time. So that's the complex waveform that is being formed. But even in those two, the amplitude of the 100 frequency signal and the 200 Hertz signal, those two may be slightly different from one to the other, and that would end up creating a different perspective of sound for us. So that is the way that we would be able to differentiate between these two sort of signals or these different signals, and that is what we would identify as timbre of a sound. So with those properties of sounds, we would be able to identify when a sound is being produced by a sound source, and we would be able to interpret that and understand what makes that particular sound signal such. But now we can look at how those things, those sound signals are now going to be transmitted. So one point is they are being produced at a sound source. So I am speaking, So that is one thing. Then that needs to be transmitted through a medium and reach a receiver before they can make a interpretation of that sound. They can hear that. Before they can hear that, it needs to be transmitted. So the properties of sound is about, we can determine that at the point of sound being produced. But after that, it needs to be transmitted for it to reach an end destination. So that's the next thing that we will be looking at. So before moving into that next section, are there any questions so far? So there are a number of key properties or key ways that we would be able to differentiate between the ways the sound can transmit. So we would look at these individually as well to get a better understanding of how the transmission of sound would work. So the first way of transmission, or the first type of a transmission, is basically no transmission. So that is, it is an isolation. So the sound is not able to travel through that particular medium, or the sound, say, if the sound is being produced here and there is something that signal to pass through, then that transmission is basically, it's not basically a transmission, it's just not going to let it go through. So that becomes isolation. So we would have, sometimes we may have full isolation, so that is no sound is passing through, but sometimes we may also have not full isolation but a level of isolation that is limiting the sound traveling, or maybe it may isolate certain frequencies, or it may isolate all the sound frequencies. So that is the way that we would limit sound from traveling. So we can have a wall that would stop, say for example, if we have a wall between where we are and the next room, that would normally make the sound traveling much more difficult. So not all the sound will be able to travel through such a barrier. Certain barriers sound can travel. Say for example, if it is a window, it may let more sound than a wall. So if we have a window in front of a house, then we would be able to hear more things from the outside of the house than if we have a wall there. So that is the way these sound traveling through air, and then how sound is going to travel through these structures is going to be dictated. The first way that is going to happen is by isolating the sound, by not letting the sound pass through. The second property about transmission of sound is what is called reflection. So what happens is, say if there is a particular surface and sound signal travels towards that, a number of things would happen. Say one of the things is sound would reflect back. So this is something that you would be familiar with in, say, in a sort of an empty room. If you are in an empty room and if you speak, you sometimes would hear what we would call as reverberations. So you may be able to hear a slight amount of sound coming back. Say if you are in an empty room, for example, and if you say clap, normally the clap sound will be produced as a single sound at first. So that is the one that you hear first. So that is the direct sound that you are hearing. So in this case, if I am clapping, the direct sound travel is from my hand where the sound is being produced to my ears. That is the direct path of sound travel. So that is the direct sound. Then what we would have is what is called early reflections. So early reflections are, say for example, if I clap and from here the sound can travel to my ear directly, but it can also travel say to this wall here, and then from that wall it can travel back to my ear. So that is early reflection. So it is coming from the sound source to the wall, to a particular wall, and coming back. So it can do to various walls around me, and those are what we would identify as early reflections. Then what will happen is these early reflections will also again travel back to the other wall, and they would create a number of more waves, and those are what we would identify as reverberations. But the thing to remember is, every time the sound is going to go and hit a point, it is not going to be coming back with the same amplitude. It is going to slowly lose its amplitude over time, but it is still going to be reflected. So this, one of the properties that we would be working when we are working in sound production, is how we would be able to manage these reverberations and reflections of sound. In certain cases we may not want any reflections. In certain cases we may want certain type of reflections and not other type of reflection. Say for example, if we are recording some voiceover, for example, we would prefer to have no reflections and have a pure sound wave. And if we are doing sound for, say, location sound for, like, say, a movie production or something, there we may want to have reflections to match a natural sound environment rather than sort of an artificial reflection or reverberation environment. So these are some of the things that we will have to think about when we are producing sound. One of the other things that can happen is what is called refraction. So refraction is basically when the sound is traveling from one medium to the other, it is going to change its direction. So maybe if you so this is you may sort of identify this from, say, prisms in sort of light signals. So when a light signal travels through prism, it changes direction. So like that. Same thing can also happen for sound signals. And in sound signals, a good example could be when we have cool air and warm air. Between those two, sound would change its direction towards the cool air. So if it is refracting this way, then sometimes sound may not travel to the expected destination. So these are again some of the things that you'll have to think about when thinking about how the sound is going to travel and how that is going to dictate how it can be heard at a particular distance or not. So that is refraction, when sound changes its direction of travel based on passing through different mediums. It can be through cool air or warm air. It can be through walls or different type of sound penetrating materials. So it can change. Then one of the other things again that we can observe is what is known as diffraction. So what happens here is, say we have so the sound is being produced from here and it is traveling in this direction, and then we have say a pillar or something in the hole in between the sound source and the listener, and because that is there, that barrier is going to bend the wave. The barrier is going to change the wave form, and it is going to change it so that the person here is now going to perceive the sound or hear the sound and it is going to reach you still somehow. So it's not going to, sound is not going to stop from reaching you, because sound will bend and still try to reach you from other places. Similarly, diffraction can also happen through what we can identify as sort of small openings. Again, even if you have a small opening in the door or the window, you can still hear the sound from outside or from inside, because sound can still come through that smaller gap and then again form back to its sort of original form, so we can still hear the sound. So that is what we would call as diffraction. So sound bending the wave. And one of the other properties that we briefly touched upon when we were talking about reflections, we said like the amplitude of the signal is going to go down over time. And one of the reasons why that happens in reflection is every time the sound is hitting a particular surface, a portion of that sound energy is going to be absorbed into that medium. Say if we are speaking and my sound signal is, so sound is being produced, it is going and hitting a particular surface, and when it is hitting that surface, some of the energy is going to be absorbed by that particular material and the rest of the signal is going to be reflected back. So whatever the energy, depending on the type of the surface, some surfaces may reflect more, so we will say that as more reflective surfaces, and some surfaces may absorb sound more, we would identify them as absorptive sound surfaces. And we would need to know these differences so that we would be able to choose materials in our sort of sound production environments to manipulate sound in the way that we want. Say if we want an environment with less reflections, then we would have to have materials along the environment that are more absorptive. So if more sound is absorbed, less sound is reflected. If we want more reflections, then we need to have less absorbing materials. So this is something that we will make a decision when we are designing spaces or when we are constructing spaces. So one of the properties that we have related to this is what is called the absorption coefficient. So that is of the sound, what is the amount of sound that will be, what is the percentage of the sound that will be absorbed. Say for example, if we think about like say glass windows and wood floors and things like that, they are very reflective and less absorbing, and this would also change along the frequency. So not all frequency sounds are going to be absorbed at the same level. Some frequencies will be absorbed more and some frequencies will be absorbed less. So different materials will have different absorption for different frequencies. Say a particular material may absorb more in say 1000 to 2000 hertz, but that may not do that much in say for example in the 125 hertz. Say for example another material may do well in a particular frequency range, but it may do very bad in another frequency range. So depending on the environment and depending on the type of sound that is being produced, we will have to decide on absorption material if that is what we are trying to do. So absorption will depend on the type of surface but also the frequency of the sound signal. Then another property again relating to interference is something that we can relate to one of the properties of sound that we looked at, that is phase of sound. So we said sounds can be in phase or out of phase, and when they are out of phase by 180 degrees, they can cancel each other out like sort of noise cancellation. So this can be impacting the transmission of sound as well. So what could happen is say for example in this one, these two microphones are out of phase. So they are at 180-degree phase difference. So what will happen is the resulting signal, if we combine the sounds that are coming from these two microphones, we may end up having them negatively cancelling out each other's signal. Whereas if we have two microphones that are capturing sound at in phase, so they will not have any sound cancellation. So this is something that you may have to do from a sound production perspective as well. That is to see if you are losing sound amplitude for a particular reason when microphones are combined, and then you may have to move those microphones accordingly so that you are making them in phase rather than out of phase. So this is something that you may have to do either from a microphone perspective and sometimes also from a speaker perspective. Depending on where speakers are placed, that may impact in your speakers cancelling each other out and you having sort of bad sort of output as a result. And one of the other possibilities that can happen is if they are out of phase by say 180 degrees, if the out of phase amount is 180 degrees, then they are going to be out of phase and possibly cancel each other out. But if they are not out of phase by 180 degrees, but they are still slightly out of phase, say they are somewhere here, so they are not fully cancelling out, but they are slightly cancelling out or changing the way the sound, and that will impact on how we hear the sound, the way the sound is perceived, and that is what we may identify as timbal change or comb filtering. Again, these are some of the things that we would come across when we are producing sound and when we are manipulating sound. So these are some of the things that we can do by playing with these basic properties of sound. Here we are working with the phase of sounds. And another key property that relates to the transmission of sound is what is called inverse square law. So when we have inverse square law, what we have is, say you have a sound source. So the sound source is producing a sound, and then you are at few different distances. So when you are at different distances, the further and further you go away, you are normally going to hear less and less sound. The amplitude of the signal is going to be less and less. One of the reasons for that is the pressure of the sound is being spread out by more area. So what we have is, at a particular distance, say R, the area of sound the signal needs to impact is this. When we go further, now same sound energy is spread out across an even larger area. If we go even further, now we have even larger area. So what we would end up with is, we would end up with areas or with different distances where the same sound pressure level, so we start from the same sound source producing the same amount of sound. At a shorter distance, most of the sound is concentrated to a smaller area. When we go further and further, it is spreading out into more area, but the same energy is there. So the energy is not increasing. So the impact of that energy having in each part of that area is going to be less and less because it is spreading out. So that is the basic idea behind inverse square law. So that is, when the distance increases, the sound level or the intensity of the sound will be inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So say if we go r distance more, the sound will decrease by r squared. So that is the basic idea that we have. If we go further and further, it will proportionally decrease. So that is basically how the sound would transmit or travel through various mediums. So how we would interpret or identify the transmission of sound. So are there any questions in that? What we looked at so far is the basic properties of sound and how the sound transmission happens from a physics perspective, and these are some of the basics that we will be using when we are working with sound from a production perspective, when we are thinking about recording sound, when we are thinking about manipulating that sound, and when we are thinking about retransmitting or transmitting that sound. So from the production, from the starting point of the sound to the end point of the sound, that whole cycle, we will need to have the understanding of how these sound signals work and how these waveforms work for us to better manipulate these signals. And from the perspective of music, that is not something that we are going to look at much more in this course, because that is not the focus of this course. But there are certain things that if you are interested in that, if that is the interest that you have to produce music or to some extent understand better how music works or music production works, you may be able to do some self-learning of certain things. And some of those things are, you need to have some basic knowledge about how music works, how musical notations works, and how those can be interpreted in sort of programmatic way and so on. So that is something you need to have. You need to have the understanding that how various basic units of music, so the musical notes and so on, and how those things can be put together to produce, say, a melody, and things about, say, harmonics. Again, like these are like how various different frequencies can be put together to produce a combined frequency of a sound signal. Again, that is very common in sort of a sound environment. So you may be able to pair two different instruments. A certain pairing may work much better than certain other pairing, and things like rhythm, like sort of rhythm patterns and so on. So there's a lot of things that you can learn about music. So these are not just from the perspective of an artistic music point of view, but also from a technical music production point of view. And some of those knowledges may also be useful from the perspective of, say, even if you are not producing your own music, you may be able to use those music in your other sort of productions that you may do. So the way that you do is, say, for example, you are doing documentaries and you are doing sort of sound effects for that, you are doing sort of background music for that. So you are working with some people, are you doing music as sort of a sound production person. So in that sort of perspective, having an understanding of music is also useful. We are not going to go into that in this course, but it is if that is your interest, you may be able to do some learning on your own to expand that knowledge. Then one of the other things that we would use is, one of the other things that we would have is that we would cover in this course is about digital workstations or digital audio workstations, or DAWs, for example, for short. So digital audio workstations can be basically the software that you use. So normally it could be the software that is used, but there could also be certain devices. So it could be a hardware based device that could be as a DAW, but in most cases, in our perspective, we would most likely be talking about a software that we are using on our computer as a digital audio workstation. So From a sound production perspective, we would use these digital audio workstations to record sound and then manipulate sound and produce the end results of that sound. So these are the software tools that we would be using in producing various sound pieces. So we would be able, so there will be different things that we can do with these software, and one of the things that is expected from you is be able to do whatever the things that we study in this course and not be dependent on a particular DAW, but be more capable of having the understanding of the basics, so you are able to do the work in any DAW, for example. So one of the situations that we come about is like there would be people who are like I am a Logic editor and I can only edit sound in Logic, and that is a very sort of stupid way of going about it. It is almost like a person saying, I am a Java programmer, so I can only program in Java. So that is a very that is also a very stupid way of thinking about it, because if you are a programmer and if you can program, doing it in a different language is should not be a bigger hurdle. Similarly, if you are an audio editor in a particular DAW, doing the same things in a different DAW should not be a bigger hurdle. So think of it in that perspective. And as I also mentioned in the previous weeks, we will not be limiting ourselves to any particular DAW in this course. Whatever things that we will be doing in this course, we can perfectly do it in a lot of the free softwares that are available. You can do it in Audacity or free versions of, say, Cubase or Pro Tools or things like that. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be anything specific. If you can say, for example, for example, I have not used Pro Tools much. That is not something that I have used a lot. But if I am given Pro Tools and somebody asks me to like do a recording in Pro Tools and do a production in Pro Tools, I am able to do that. I mean, like, it may take me a bit of a time to figure out the shortcuts and so on, because the keyboard shortcuts and things may be different. But the basic principles of how I would be able to working in those different tools are going to be similar. So from the perspective of this course, we will not be sticking to any of these softwares. I would say if you don't want anything fancy, choose Audacity and do. If you want something else, choose one of these other things. If you also want to use something that you can also use for, say, video editing and other things, maybe choose DaVinci Resolve and use the Fairlight tab for the audio editing part. So it's up to you in terms of what tool that you are using. As long as you have a tool that you can use, that would be fine. That's up to you. Maybe I'll upload some of the setups for these on LMS as well by the coming weeks, and we will start some sort of homework activities from next week, from small homework activities, and that would count towards your assessment as well. So in the meantime, again, I would highly recommend that you choose a DAW and try to do any sort of self-learning as much as you can. If possible, refer to online resources, and I will also try to share additional resources on LMS, and you have to try it out on your own and figure that out. We will be covering some basics, but beyond that, the expectation is that you are able to do these on your own. And one of the other things that we need to sort of remember is there will be some group projects as well, and for those you will have to choose your groups. Then there will be some projects that are individual, so those will have to do individual. I will post probably by next week. I will post on LMS an announcement asking for group selections, and then you can decide upon yourselves, and I'll post the details there as well, so we can do that by next week. So the summary is, it has to be something that happens as sort of learning by doing it. So it cannot happen as sort of me teaching, and you may not be able to learn by just by my teachings or just listening to me or so on. You will have to do these things, and we will start to do some of those activities in the coming weeks as well. But in the meantime, I would highly advise you all to choose a digital audio workstation. I would suggest say Audacity, if that's what you do. If you're familiar with something else, go with that as well, and try to familiarize yourself with those software and so on, so you can benefit from when we are coming to the take-home assignments and projects and so on. So with that, we would be coming to the end of today's lesson, and we will continue similarly in the coming weeks as well. And as I said, I will post the resources, and the slides are already there on LMS, and the video will also be available there. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the meantime as well. So until next week, thank you. Bye.